From an extrovert's point of view, one thing is just because you don't hear from your introvert friend does not mean they're not thinking about you. It's just not natural for them to be the one to reach out. So introverts really appreciate the extrovert taking the initiative and reaching out. In addition to that, knowing that if an introvert is choosing to spend time with you, you are extremely important in their life. The last thing that most introverts want to do is commit to a plan.
Hello, and welcome to the Stroke It podcast. I'm Jenny Townsend, your host. This podcast is for individuals that are wanting to grow personally and professionally. The podcast is going to offer mindset shifts, personal experiences from myself and guest. We're also going to provide some great resources, tools, and direction for navigating life. The goal is to inspire you and encourage you to take ownership of your life and begin living it completely fully today. Let's get to stroking it. Hello and welcome to the Stroke It podcast. My guest today is Kimberly. I'm super excited to speak with her. She is all about coaching women, the introverts. My husband is an introvert. I'm a total extrovert. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation. We're going to be talking about employees. We're going to be talking about spouses, friends, and family. So I'm sure we're going to all learn how to communicate with those individuals, how to make them feel welcome, how to give them a voice and not take over their world, and know that they are fabulous people, even though they may not feel it or want to speak up at times. So Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm excited to be here.
So Kimberly is a wife and mom to a blended family of 5 ages from 33 to 8. She's also a grandmother. She's an avid reader. She's an organization nerd, podcast junkie, loves all things The Grinch, and spent 28 years in corporate America. She held various leadership roles as well. And she is the owner and founder of Quiet Spark Coaching. So she will be dropping some really great tools and resources for you as well. We're going to encourage you to go to her website and connect with her as well. And Kimberly, tell us where you're at and give us a snippet of what we can expect to learn from you today.
Yeah. So I am located in the Midwest. I am in a suburb of Chicago in Illinois. And I'm really excited to share a little bit in the inner workings of an introvert, what goes on in our brain and how we process things and how best to communicate with us and help us to really thrive as introverts.
There's such a huge difference between introverts and extroverts. And even with my team members, I've got a combination of both of them. So it's super interesting when you put them into a room together. We have team meetings or we have team building exercises. And so I'm definitely excited to learn from you as well. So I love talking first and foremost about the love languages because I think it's super important, especially when acknowledging individuals in our life. And this could be very different for extroverts and introverts as well. So you had indicated that gifts is your love language. Has gifts always been your love language? Or has it changed throughout the years?
As far as I can remember, gifts has been my love language. I think it was my grandmother's love language as well, because that's the way that she used to show us that she loved us, was by taking us out, taking us shopping for new school clothes when it was that time of year, things like that. So I feel like in a way I inherited that, like I learned what what love was through her, and that became my love language.
That's awesome. Very cool. What's the coolest gift that someone's ever bought you?
Probably, my daughter's dad actually gave me a pink sapphire ring when she was born. And to me, I just thought that was so thoughtful because her birthday was in September and traditionally it's blue, and she was a girl. So he went the extra mile and said, okay, pink. And so, yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. And it's so memorable. I know that some of my team members as well, that their love language is gifts. They can remember those gifts as well, too. So, well, thank you for sharing that story with us. So let's get right into the topics that you've selected. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about employees. And you believe that the greatest privilege is that you've had and you've experienced is being able to lead. So talk to us about your leadership style and how you were able to engage with individuals, whether they're introvert or extrovert, and really bring out the best in those employees.
Yeah, I have honestly think that leading people is like such a privilege and such a gift. And when you have the opportunity to be in that position, you get to choose how you want to interact with the individuals that are there. And I found through my almost 30-year career that really investing in what is important to each individual is super important. Understanding that when you're working with someone who's an introvert, they may not want to talk to you every single week. Like, even though everyone says, oh, you need to have a weekly touch base with all of your employees, they may be like, that's too much for me. Like, I need every other week or maybe once a month is plenty, and having respect for their wishes and understanding that this is what feels comfortable to them. Because when I do meet with my introverts and I do honor their time, I tend to get a lot more information out of them than I do with my extroverts. They'll share about their personal life. They'll share about what's happening in the workplace. They'll share a little bit of everything. And I think that's really important that you, as a leader, you are meeting people where they're at and helping them to express what they feel is important for you to know and to really honor what it is that they're saying to you. So my leadership style is very much more hands-off. You're a grown-up. You know what you need to do. You go ahead and do that. I'm not a micromanager. I can be if I need to be, but I'm not. And my extroverts are like, want to talk to me like every day. You know what I mean? And they're constantly like IMing me and, oh, Kim, let me tell you about this. And let's talk about this. And, and you have to respect that as well, right? And receive what they're giving to you too.
Yeah, 100%. So when we talk about meetings let's talk about giving praise first and foremost, because I think that's super important to break down different ways to praise and celebrate introverts versus extroverts. And I know it's very, very differently. Like, for instance, I have some team members that are super shy. They're introverts. Like, if I acknowledge them at a staff meeting or award ceremony, they're like, oh, they're afraid to come up and get the award. They don't want to receive the award. They don't feel they're deserving at times. So can you break down some really great tools that we can utilize when showing praise to introverts?
Yeah, for an introvert especially, I always like to ask, how do you feel about this? And really get their opinion, get their perspective on it. But I also feel 99% of the time with an introvert, they want that private praise. They want the email that says, these are all the things that I admire that you've done. Or they want that handwritten card that says, I really appreciate that you did this. And you have specific examples for them of what they did. They prefer, like you said, they prefer not to be in the spotlight and not to be the center of attention, where our extrovert friends are like,
100% for sure. I mean, even just like with Slack as well. So we use Slack within our organization. And we'll Slack individuals, to give them the praise versus, acknowledging them in front of everybody as well. So I think they receive it differently as well, where they can kind of celebrate with themselves and, put the smile on their face, whereas maybe they're afraid to celebrate that too in front of everybody if that's what they're not comfortable with.
Right. And introverts love going deep. So the more specific that you can be with the praise that you're giving, if you can provide details, like that's really important to them. And that really helps them to recognize and acknowledge that you're paying attention as their leader and that you really get it. Like, I understand you. I know what motivates you. And I see these extra things that you're doing. That's super important to an introvert.
Yeah. So as you're saying that, I want to talk a little bit about the energy that you bring to the conversations from an introvert as well. So is it high energy? Is it low energy? Are you really close and in with them? Are you a little bit back and, keeping some distance? So talk about in person what that looks like as far as, closeness and energy.
Yeah, in person, you definitely want to make sure you have your personal space, right? I always think of like the Dirty Dancing analogy, this is my space, this is your space. Like, to me, that's something that resonates a lot with an introvert. being really comfortable in where you're sitting, how you're sitting, reflect like you're not closed off, you don't have your arms crossed and your legs crossed and all of that, right? You want to be very open because they're going to read the room. Introverts they're great observers. And so they're watching everything that's going on. They're noticing if you're grabbing your phone and clicking on things while you're having a conversation with them. They know if you're looking to see who's walking by the office so that you can say hi to that person instead of paying attention to them. So when you are in person with them, you want to make sure, one, that you are matching their energy as much as possible. Too high energy is going to drain them right away, and you're going to barely get anything out of them. Too low energy, they're going to be like, oh, they don't really care. So it's really finding that happy medium and then making sure there's an appropriate distance and that you are very open with your body language, and keeping that eye contact is really, really critical.
Okay. While you're saying these things, I'm running through all my team members. And I have one team member in particular, actually two of them, they kind of resemble each other. And I struggle with this, and I'm hoping maybe you can coach me on it, like a live coach here with our audience. And, what I'm wanting and needing from this individual is a little bit more excitement or a little bit more movement. And even with like communicating with our parents or the rest of our staff, they're very much like flight or flat, non-personal at times, like barely can get a smile out of them. This person I always ask, like, oh, how are you? Fine. And then never reciprocates with the question. And they love their job. They want to be there forever. Like, they're really grateful for me. Like, this person will email me quarterly how grateful he is to work at our organization. But at the same time, it's like, no matter how many conversations I have with him, that I need him just to give us a little bit more spunk and personality and more smiles, I can't get him to do that. What is the magic spell?
I think engaging in, and this is going to sound very counterintuitive, I will say that first, but I think engaging in a deep conversation with him. So what is it that he's passionate about? What does he really get excited about? And being able to allow him to see that you're invested in what he's really interested in, you may see the smile crack a little bit. And then okay, I can lead with this topic. Maybe he's really into like model toy trains or something. And you're like, oh my gosh, did you see that there was this train festival going on? I thought about you when I saw it. And you'd be surprised, like once you really know what makes them tick, how much more they're going to open up to you when you've done the work to help figure out what that is for them.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I've leaned into that, and I have spent, like, what are your hobbies? What do you want to do? And, I have even complimented how like nice his smile is. And he has a really great smile. Like, we would love to see more of it. And, I did get a little bit of a crack of a smile at that point too, but, I'm really struggling with it. So maybe you and I can have a conversation a little bit more offline on how to pull this introvert a little bit forward. Because he's super talented. He's one of our best teachers as well. But when it comes to, connecting with the team and having fun and like, showing that you enjoy your work, I don't know if it's just the introvert in him that it just is maybe taking over, and that's where we can't crack that code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it could be just, like, have you asked him flat out, like, you don't smile a lot. Is there anything that we can do to help you smile a little more? Is there something I'm not aware of?
Yeah, I got a response. Find me a girlfriend. Which that I cannot do. I'm sorry, I can't get involved in your personal life. But anyways, so this is a podcast and a personal coaching session with me. So I want to make sure that we are, making sure all of our guests are learning as well. But, maybe some of them deal with that as well. Especially, I think a lot of business owners, you work so hard to build the culture and making sure everybody's really, really happy. And, for my leadership style, I'm an extrovert. So I've got to really be mindful of that. So for the extrovert leaders, if there was one or two things that you would consider them to do in their future leadership to engage or empower or, to validate those introverts in their organizations, what would be one or two tips that you would give us?
First and foremost, with an introvert, you're going to have to engage with them first. So no matter what, they're not going to come to you and start sharing a bunch of stuff with you. You have to be there to ask them a lot of questions. Introverts don't mind talking about themselves as long as you're driving the conversation. But if you ask them, tell me about you, they're going to be like, So be ready to drive the conversation with them. And then secondly, I would say give them the opportunity to lead. I think introverts naturally won't sign up to raise their hand and say, I'll do it. But if they are given the opportunity to lead, you'll be really surprised at like what you get out of it and how they come out of their shell by being the person who is responsible for something that's important.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really great thing. And with your point with them not wanting to say a lot of things too about themselves too is super true. I did this exercise with my team a couple months ago where it was like, what do you bring to the table? What do you have that's valuable? What are you offering the team? And my introverts literally could not write anything on the paper. So I had our team go around and say really positive things or things they valued about that team member. And their sheets actually ended up being more full than the other team members as well. And so, they do have a hard time talking about themselves. So we had to pull it. And then they were like, oh, yeah, you're right. I do that. Or it was validation for them as well. So, okay, before we move on to the next stakeholder, which is spouse, is there anything else that you would like to share when it comes to employee engagement or validation or anything like that when it comes to introverts?
I think once you get an introvert on your side, they're always going to be on your side. And I think that's a really important thing. Once you crack that nut, you're going to have them with you forever.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, I'm going to get a nutcracker and take it to work next time. Hopefully that will work. So anyways, well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that you have some tips too. Let me ask you this question before we move on. If you have a boss that's an introvert, from an employee's perspective, what are some tools that you can give that employee if they have a boss that's an introvert?
Be very respectful of their time. Make sure that when you are taking up their time, that you're using that time to talk about something that is beneficial to both of you. That's going to be super important to them. Don't put them in the spotlight and ask them questions that they aren't expecting to have to answer. Is a super, give them the heads up. Hey, during this meeting, I'm going to ask you this question because my team wants to know, or I've heard rumblings about this, because that's going to give them time to prepare. And then my last big tip is after you leave a big event or a meeting or something like that, give them space because they need time to recover from what just happened. All of that energy that they put out, they need some time to recover.
Yeah, that's a really valid point as well, too. Okay, I'm going to take that tip for myself, too. Okay, so the next stakeholder that we're talking about, and when I refer to stakeholders, the stakeholders are based on all the individuals in your life. My book, The Stroke It Guide, features different stakeholders, and it obviously starts with you, and then your spouse, your employer, employees, and it goes so on. So the next topic we're going to be talking about is spouse, and you've had indicated that your husband's love language is acts of service. So I really want to dive into that and basically how you utilize your knowledge to, stroke your spouse, enhance your relationship, what you've learned, and what valuable tools you can share with us.
Yeah. So funny enough, my husband is an extrovert. I think opposites tend to attract when it comes to your spousal partner. And so what I learned early on was that our love languages were completely different. And so for him, acts of service are little things that I can do to make his day go easier. And so for me, as an introvert, it's very easy for me to identify what those are because I observe and I'm a watcher and I know, okay, when he gets home, he's going to be hungry because he, is on his feet all day and he's working and he's running around. So I always want to make sure that I have something in mind ready for dinner. So that's a great act of service for me to be able to offer for him. He works in a medical environment. So like taking his lab coat to the dry cleaner because it's usually not open by the time he gets home from work and it's not open before he goes to work. So little things like that I can do in order to show him that I care, I see what's going on, I'm watching, I know what's important to you, has been really helpful for our relationship for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you're saying all that. So when you found out that his love language was acts of service, and obviously you know yours, did you guys read the book, The Love Languages, or how did you guys both discover each other's love languages?
So, funny story. I am an avid reader. I love to read. So I read all of the books, and then I tell him, honey, we have to do this quiz. So I read the whole book, and then at the end we did the quiz together because he's very receptive to doing those kinds of things. In a way, it's like my way of servicing his need to not have to read the book, right? Just give me the important details. That's what I want to know, and I want to know all the stuff in between. So it worked out really well for us, but we actually ended up doing the quiz in the car. We were going for a long drive, and I'm like, okay, let's do this quiz. And so
that's awesome. So you and your husband sound very much like my husband and I as well, too. He's very much introvert, detail oriented, acts of service, wants all the facts, and there's so many similarities as well, where I'm the extrovert and I just want the cliff notes, just tell me the details. Actually, just tell me what we're doing. Just make the decision, give me the solution. I even tell this with my team as well. We actually did a whole communication team building thing, and it was basically about the shapes, and everyone had different shapes and how we receive messages and how to communicate with us as well too. So we've been able to tune into what we need to communicate so that the receiver listens and we can actually work together as well. So that's awesome that you're able to acknowledge that and create the time. And you have been married for how many years?
We've been married for 9 years.
9 years. That's amazing. Congratulations. So if we have some individuals that have been married, maybe, within 1 to 9 years, usually that can be a really challenging time for marriages. I mean, you're learning to live with somebody else. You're learning to make big decisions. You're making investments. You're raising children. And, you may have different points of views, or you may just lack communication skills. And instead of growing together, you maybe grow apart as well. So in the past 9 years, what do you think has been some of the top moments of success that has really brought you closer and has helped you, whether it's using the love languages, whether understanding what he needs and support, but what would you say to individuals that are in that first 9 years of marriage?
Yeah, I think for my husband and I, since this is not our first marriage, right? We both come from previous relationships. We both really had this mindset that we want this to succeed. And we weren't willing to fall into the same traps that we fell into with our previous relationships. So talking about things even when it's hard, not expecting each other to read each other's minds. Well, you should just know that I feel this way because of the way you said that. Well, you should know that I had a bad day and that's why it came out that way, So really asking clarifying questions, remembering why you chose this person to be with in the first place, constantly reminding yourself of that, making sure that you're making time for each other, I think is super important. I find a lot that the longer you're married, the more you end up getting in this roommate relationship instead of this is my intimate partner who I share my deepest desires with, right? And so making sure that you are prioritizing yourselves, because once you start having kids, man, it's so hard. They suck all of your energy.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I didn't have children. I never wanted them. But I was every time it was thinking about it, I was oh my God, I'm already tired. I can't imagine having children. I have no energy. But I do believe that, keeping the marriage as a priority is super, super important because you're most likely better together than separate. And I do believe in a lot of things that you're saying, even with the communication. I know for my husband and I have to really listen to what he's saying because a lot of times he'll talk to me and I'll be somewhat listening, but I know that he really needs me to listen and I need to know what he's saying, and then repeating back what I heard has been important. because sometimes he'll see something and then 5 minutes later he's like, that's not what I meant. I was like, oh, so.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You really hit it, like making sure that you keep your relationship a priority. Yeah, it's critical. I think that's really critical.
Right. And I say that because my marriage was not a priority for a really long time, hence the Stroke It podcast. And this podcast was inspired by somebody else stroking my husband because our marriage was not a priority. So we've been able to overcome that and work together because, like you said, remember who you married, why you fell in love with each other, and then making that time and that commitment and wanting to make it work, and not giving up and throwing in the towel, which it could be super, super easy to do. But I'm glad that we did not throw in the towel, that we made it work and made it a priority. So if anyone's out there listening, don't throw in the towel. Make it work if you can. So anyways, okay, awesome. So I love everything that you just shared about that. Obviously, you understand your spouse, your spouse understands you, which helps with your relationship. So I do want to move into the friends and family portion of this as well. It looks like you had indicated too about being a great observer and an even better listener, and you're able to understand other people's needs. And I know that you did reference this earlier when we were talking about the introvert, how they are great observers and listeners, and they, are reading that room as well. And I think so many times you have someone in the room that just is the center of attention, that takes over. And that was me for a very long time, and I didn't allow people to have a voice and share their stories. And so at times I wasn't a great friend or family member as well. So give us some tips and tools and some actionable steps that we can implement in our lives to make us a better friend or family member.
Yeah. So being a friend or a family member to an introvert is having genuine concern about how are you doing? Let's have a conversation, and carving out that time so that you can actually be dedicated to listening to that person. Like you just said about your husband, like you have to make sure that you're actually listening. That's super important to an introvert, to know that they're being heard. It's really easy for an introvert to be the listener all the time. I think every introvert has an extrovert best friend. Like my best friend is a complete extrovert. She's the total opposite of me. And I would say 3 out of the 4 times we get together, she's doing all the talking and I'm doing all the listening. And then she'll say, okay, what's going on with you? And that's fine for me. That's enough for me because I know that she cares because she's asking the question and she's really listening. And so I think that's super important to an introvert.
Yeah, 100%. Listening is so important. That actually was my word, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And to become a better listener, every time I'd want to talk, or I'd be like, oh, I can totally relate, or I wanted to share my story, I had to stop. And then I was listening. I was like, oh my God, if I would have interrupted, I would have never got to learn. I would have never known this, or they would have never been able to finish that story. And I had some struggles with actually one of my friends, and I finally shut up. And then I found out all these things about her. And she's like, oh my God, if you would have been listening several years ago, you would have known all these things, not just finding out all these things today. And I think we do tend to extroverts too. We're so excited about everything. We amplify, and I'm speaking personally because that's me. And sometimes it doesn't always work, and you're not going to have that great relationship. My husband, as I said, he's an introvert as well. And he spent so many years listening. And I didn't even know he wasn't listening anymore. I didn't even know that other things were going on because I just never stopped talking. So, we've got it as extroverts. I want to encourage everyone and myself to just stop talking for a little bit and start listening, because you can learn so much. And there's so many things, the conversations my husband and I have now are just absolutely amazing. I had no idea he thought like he did with certain things, or he was interested in certain things, or he wanted to have all these conversations. Now he never shuts up.
Yeah, that's the thing with an introvert. If you get them in an environment where they feel safe, you'll forget that they're an introvert, and you're like, who are you?
Yeah, 100% as well. Yeah, I think that's all really great information. When you think of, having relationships with introverts, can you think of one or two things that maybe we didn't get to mention or you think would be super, super important from an extrovert's point of view or to an extrovert and then introvert to introvert?
I think from an extrovert's point of view, one thing is just because you don't hear from your introvert friend does not mean they're not thinking about you. It's just not natural for them to be the one to reach out. So introverts really appreciate the extrovert taking the initiative and reaching out. In addition to that, knowing that if an introvert is choosing to spend time with you, you are extremely important in their life. Like the last thing that most introverts want to do is commit to a plan to be out with somebody and do something. So if they are spending time with you, appreciate all of that time that they're spending with you and then let them be for a couple of weeks before you try to drag them out again, because it gets to be a bit overwhelming.
Right. And I want to reiterate what you said earlier, too. If they are choosing to spend this time, be completely focused on them, reduce any distractions, and really be present. And I think that goes for anyone and everyone as far as all relationships. If you're going to spend time or you're going to make time for someone, be present in that moment. I want to encourage people with Apple Watches to take the Apple Watches off while you're having coffee with people, whether it's introvert or extrovert. Oh, it's so annoying to me. And I don't want to rant about that. But if you're thinking about being present with people and giving people your time, please remove the watch. Please remove the watch. That's all I'm going to say. Kimberly, is there anything else that you can think that we should consider or trying in the future? Do you have any great events or resources that we can share with our listeners today? I definitely want you to tell us where we can find you, connect with you. I think so many people need you. I know a lot of business coaches and CEOs that I'm working with right now could benefit from all of your expertise. So tell us how we can connect and where we can get more of you.
Yeah, so my website is just my name, KimberlyCharvet.com. So you can always find me there. I do have a group on meetup.com for introverted women. We are just over 900 women in there, and we do at least some sort of event over Zoom once a week. So highly encourage you to come there. We do a lot of networking, and that may sound counterintuitive to an introvert. However, the focus is really on helping you to feel comfortable when you're in those kinds of environments. So it's a very safe networking group to be in. And then, of course, you can find me everywhere on social, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, under Quiet Spark Coaching. So, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So the 900 women that you have, you're saying every single week, are the same women showing up every week, or are you thinking maybe they'll come every few weeks because they're exhausted after that one time?
Exactly. Yeah. Some weeks I'll get 20 women, and then some weeks I'll only have 3 or 4. And I have a couple that come back. I actually have a couple of extroverted women in my group who just really enjoy the conversation with the introverts. And so, yeah, I love the ability to allow people to come and go as they please. There are no rules in my group. You come when you want and you leave when you want, and that's totally okay.
I love that. And that's just an open platform where they're sharing maybe a struggle or a challenge, or they're looking for coaching from you, or they're looking for resources. Why are people showing up to that?
Yeah, so we do a lot of networking in the group, and then I also invite my women who are in the group to be able to share presentations, talks, information that's going to be important to you as a woman. Coming up, I have someone who builds websites, and so she's going to talk about what's the importance of having a website and what are the things that you really need to look at. All sorts of different things like that. I've had a hypnotherapist in my group do a talk and talk about, why hypnotherapy is a great tool. I had someone teach us Qigong, which is Chinese meditation.
I love Qigong. I just actually, ironically,
this past April, went to my first class and I was like moving this ball and, it was like the youngest person in there. It's all like, older people. I'm like, younger people should be doing this. And then oddly enough, I had a Craig Cook, who was a podcast guest. He wrote a book and he's all about that spiritual movement and healing and using the body and super powerful. So that's awesome that you were doing that. So awesome. Well, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows about your group. And if you are tuning in, her information is going to be in the show notes. So click on that. We want to encourage you as well to send this podcast to maybe 5 of your friends, introvert or extrovert, or someone that can benefit from learning from Kimberly. I think she dropped a lot of great, valuable tools and tips as well. And I think that we can all learn something from her, and please connect with her in the future. Kimberly, thank you so much for your time. And would you like to leave our guests any final notes?
Well, thank you, Jenny, for having me on the show. And I would say, if you have an introvert who is your friend, give them some grace. Give them some space, and know that if they trust you, they're going to be wanting to be with you an awful lot more than you thought was possible. So,
I love that point because I have some introvert friends or some family members as well. And they're always like, well, so-and-so didn't call. I'm like, call them. Like, don't wait for people. Like, if you're thinking about someone and they cross your mind, send them a text, give them a call. If they're available, they're going to pick up the phone. If they're not, at least they know that you're thinking of it. So we're all so quick to judge people or like say, oh, they don't want to be part of our lives, and like something negative. And sometimes your friend or family member is being quiet. They may have something going on too. They may be waiting for you to call them because maybe they've got a lot going on as well. So people cross my mind all the time. I'm like, oh, I got to text them. Got to let them know I'm thinking about it. And half the people don't even respond. I don't even get a thumbs up from half of them, but at least I know I'm sending it to them. And when they're ready, they'll reach out. So awesome. All right, Kimberly, I'm wishing you a great day. I'm wishing everyone a great day. Thanks for tuning in to the Stroke It podcast. Once again, send this to your friends, give us a review, connect with us.
Thanks for listening to the Stroke It podcast today. If you want to stroke me, please consider giving me a 5-star review, sharing this podcast with 5 of your favorite friends or someone you may think could benefit from the podcast, and consider joining my collective. It's completely free for the first 30 days, and you can go to jennysfreegift.com.